Here today. This was very much on short notice, so don't expect any slides. But I think for 15 minutes we'll do without slides. I'm in charge of 3M New Ventures, which is on one side the venture capital unit of 3M. I'm heading this endeavor worldwide, not from Minnesota, where our company originally comes from, but here from Berlin, actually. Which is a great thing to do. So for me, a local event is something very rare, so I'm very happy to be here today. So thank you again for the invitation. In terms of what we do, we have started this endeavor roughly 6 years ago. And up until now, we have invested roughly $500 million in startups worldwide. Out of 6 offices in North America, in Asia, and here in Europe. And also in South America now, out of an office in Sao Paulo as well. So what we do is we invest in companies that have developed some interesting technology, and they may only be half a year to a year old, and may only have 2 or 3 people, and may, for the most part, actually be, or are actually, for the most part, pre-revenue. But they have developed something that has a certain meaning or notion to us, where we think, hey, this is something, when we incorporate it going forward, could make a whole lot of sense for us in terms of new technologies, new technology platforms, new ideas to drive into our company from a different angle. Next to the responsibility for that program, I'm also in charge of the global relationship to Google and to the larger venture capital firms that we are very often co-investing with. As you may know, we play an instrumental role in Google Glass. The actual picture providing device of glass, the prism that is sitting in front of your eye, is a 3M product. And we're already working on the 2nd generation and the 3rd generation. And going forward, you will not see that this is a computer anymore. It will be all hidden in the frame and behind on the side of the frame. So the later versions that we're going to see over the next couple of years will happen in standard frames. And then after this, everything will happen in the end in a contact lens. Which may sound unbelievable today, but there are existing prototypes around picture-providing devices, cameras, etc., all tucked into a contact lens. Just to give you an idea, that is not really around the area of wearables, but something that you should understand in order to see where things are going and how fast things are progressing. We have actually invested in a company based out of MIT in Cambridge, just outside of Boston. And this company has developed a needleless drug delivery device, basically the size of a electric toothbrush, where you basically take the device, you add a little tank to it by screwing it on that may contain insulin for blood sugar treatment or diabetes treatment. And in the front, you screw on another device, which is a little nozzle that basically shapes a channel that is roughly 40 micron thick, which is like roughly the diameter of the sting of a bee. And then what the system does by the means of a moving coil, it's taking a certain amount of insulin and is transporting this, and it's providing actually very high pressure through the nozzle, and then the insulin is being shot into your blood path or into your tissue without a needle. And if you take this forward and combine it with this sugar level sensing contact lens that Google has introduced roughly half a year ago, and when you combine this, you will get closed-loop blood sugar treatment. Which will address a disease that roughly 500 million people on the planet are suffering from. So this is something that we are working on. These are companies that we are financing. And this is kind of how we are trying to push the envelope in terms of technology. Talking about wearables and the subject that we have here today, some things I would like to tell you from our perspective, because, you know, on one side, wearables are more or less a commodity from our perspective. It's sensors, it's nothing special. They detect heat, heartbeat, certain conditions of your body, but all this data needs to be turned into actionable information. So the system that is connected to this wearable makes sense out of this data. And that's the whole issue today. The sensors themselves are, from our perspective, nothing too special anymore because you can buy them around the corner for a couple of cents. The question is, how do you establish a software ecosystem that makes sense of all of this data? So you, as a user, really can derive something meaningful from it and can live a better life or be more healthy or whatever what you're trying to achieve. And also what the company is trying to achieve that is selling you those products. And this is actually a very big movement that we're seeing right now on the venture capital scene, where companies are trying to establish systems that are taking the data from those sensors that are knitted into your garment, and then they're trying to turn them into information where you, your doctor, or a related ecosystem can make sense of. You may have heard about the acquisition of a company by Google. The company is called DeepMind, and DeepMind is a provider of artificial intelligence software solutions. Rather sophisticated, based on stochastic networks and other ideas around complex mathematics, around how to turn this data into actionable information. So there's a lot of research going on, and this is where we think the game changer will lie in the end, because basically, when you just look at the sensor, as I said, it's a commodity, but when you look at software that is really in a position to turn this into information that you can make sense of, then it's making a difference. And for the most part, you will also see integrated systems like Apple's watch that will be coming out quite soon, and other products from companies like LG or Samsung that will also work in that space. So there's a lot to be seen, and also in terms of the related display technologies. There's another company that actually just got financing at an order of magnitude of $500 million US. The company is located in San Francisco. They don't have a website. They're completely operating in stealth mode, but they're already valued at a level of above $2 billion. And for them, it's about a projective display technology. So going forward, in relation to sensors that we will have on our body, those systems will be in a position to project a picture that people can see who may have the next version of Google Glass, in order to figure out in between themselves how a certain piece of architecture may look like. So imagine 3 architects, 2 here sitting in Berlin, another one sitting in Tokyo, shaping a 3-dimensional structure using certain gestures that is being built up virtually in front of them, and is basically sitting on the tabletop in front of them. Somebody was talking about Darth Vader. Some of you may recall how R2-D2 projected the image of Princess Leia. Forget this. This is just very low tech and not good quality. We're talking about that you could imagine that you can project a person within a time frame of I would say 4 years that looks really human, but it's not. It's just virtual. So this is where things are going. So we're talking about combinations of sensoring data. We're talking about making sense of it all in terms of an AI layer on top of it, and then also very advanced picture providing technologies and systems that will be projected in front of your eye. So the normal smartphone with your little, I don't know, 4-inch display will definitely go away. It will all happen in a much more virtual way by the means of wearables that will be attached to your body. I hope I'm not frightening anybody, but this is where things will go, and it's actually quite interesting to see what's happening behind the scenes in order to enable those technologies. Perhaps one interesting, I don't know, this is kind of my point. So sensors, all right, yeah, but commodity, software, much more important, and turning the data into actionable information. That's the big leap that people are currently working on. Sensors are getting smaller and smaller. The technology to convey data is getting more and more easy. Google's contact lens works in a way that it's basically receiving a certain amount of energy via induction. This is waking up the processor is taking the measurement is being sent out via low power Bluetooth to a device that then may be mounted to your upper arm. My toothbrush device I mentioned earlier can of course be made smaller and then attached to your upper arm in order to provide the certain amount of insulin that you may need at a certain point in time. So just every other day you may want to change it, but basically this will provide for closed loop blood sugar treatment within a time frame of 3 to 4 years, so it's not too far away. Then when you push this forward, and that may be another interesting point for you to understand, who in this room here has heard about Calico, California Life Company? Just very few people. It got founded by Brin and Page of Google, the 2 founders of Google, and they each provided this venture with $500 million US in cash to start the operations out of their own money, not Google's money, their own money. And the idea is to bring human life to a span of 120 to 140 years. rather quickly. What they have done is they have hired Art Levinson, who used to be the chairman of Apple, and one of the founders of this famous biotech startup, of a famous biotech startup in California that I will mention a little bit later. And what they are trying to do is now, after the genome has been sequenced, they are trying to sequence the human phenome. The phenome builds up in you from day one of your life, depending on the nutrition that you receive from your parents, then later on how you feed yourself, what kind of environments you're living in, etc. So basically how you live your life and how healthy this is. A combination of the phenome and genome will then be given to your kids. So when you figure out the mathematical correlation in between the genome and the phenome, you can actually come into a position where you should be able to really extend the human lifespan to the amount of years I just mentioned. In direct correlation to that, the device I mentioned for insulin certainly can also be used to provide any other medicine at the right point in time, at the right doses into your body. So some people may need this, I don't know, from age 50, other ones from age 70. But in the end, it will provide a much healthier life, and certainly everybody can decide whether he or she wants to do it. But this is kind of where things will go, because you can use the same device to convey 4 different substances at the same time, for example. And the whole effort is a very complex effort, of course, because the correlation between the phenome and the genome is much more complex than just figuring out the genome. But in the end, it will lead you to a situation where you will really be able to figure out the details of human life and what's kind of behind it in terms of our setup, how we function, how major diseases can be cured, etc. So this effort will provide for a lot of insight into how the human body operates. The people who are among the advisory board of Calico are leading professors from Harvard, MIT, Stanford, Caltech, and other universities, an extremely sophisticated group of people. This will then also, in terms of wearables, result in the fact that most possibly you will have a sensor embedded beneath your skin, censoring certain body functions, glucose levels, whatever else you need, enzyme levels, in order to figure out the state of your body. And the result will be that the system will then give you advice around, on one side, customized medicine. Medicine going forward will be completely customized to your body, and also customized nutrition. Like for you, for example, a banana in the morning may be just perfect, but for me it could be the worst thing I can do in terms of how I feed myself. So going forward, we'll be able to figure out whether this or this or this will make sense. And this is also a scenario that we see playing out in a time frame of roughly 10 years to 12 years, not longer. So there's also a lot to come. Yeah, these are kind of the stories I have to, or I can talk about today. I don't know whether there are any questions or concerns or thoughts about this. Feel free to ask.
Thanks. There was a lot of focus on services and new services. In how far is 3M involved in the traditional materials that might help bring wearables to a mass market? So not just sensors attaching to clothes, but basically everything being a wearable, you know? Yeah, I mean, we're doing a lot in basic products and materials, in terms of, for example, glues or adhesives or specific materials, like durable materials, to attach sensors to garments, for example. There's a very broad offering, but still the actual sensor itself is more or less a commodity already, no matter which size you're talking about. Certainly it's always a question, how do you embed it into the garment? How do you make it stick to the human body or wherever you want it? This is our core business, and this is where we're currently making our money. But we are, in a very diligent way, currently addressing ideas around how to build a software infrastructure on top of those applications. Because in the end, the industry, and you are the industry for us, is looking for applications and solutions that do the trick in a much broader scale. Because in the end, you know, you can add so many sensors to the garment that you are selling, but it needs to be connected to an ecosystem. And there will not be too many ecosystems. If you look at what will happen is basically we're talking Apple and Google,
some other related ecosystems, but in the end they need to happen within those two ecosystems, and they cannot be disconnected. And this is another very interesting and very serious play right now, is basically who is going to win this ecosystem question, and where things will go, and how many users will be really attracted by this. Because when you're looking at devices like, I don't know, Fitbit or now the Apple Watch that's coming, in the end, we only see two predominant systems surviving. It's like with smartphones. I mean, BlackBerry is basically dead, and there's a good reason for that. Nokia is basically dead, and there's another good reason for that. So things will narrow down because the programmers who are really giving you the value in terms of really great applications that you love to use, they stick to standard platforms. They don't want to program something for, I don't know, a couple of 100,000 BlackBerry users on the planet. They just don't care about this anymore.
So you would say that as a fashion designer, you would have to really make yourself familiar with programming, or what would you suggest?
Yeah, I mean, this is where the value for you is coming from. I mean, I can put on the greatest garment with the greatest sensors, but what do I do with it? I'm using iHealth of Apple, like every day it tells me how far I've walked, and it's giving me some other really cool advice. I really like to use it. And if this going forward will be connected with a garment, because certainly I don't take my iPhone with me when I'm running around the forest, because it's a burden on me, you know. But if the garment could store this information and then send it to my iPhone once I arrived back home, then this is making sense and providing me with a good use case. But I'm quite sure that all those new applications, they will need a connection to a meaningful application that people can make sense of and would love to use.
Are there any more questions from your side? Okay, maybe one question from me. So if you look at the ecosystems worldwide, where would you say are the most driving ones? So if you look at the cities or countries?
Well, for me, those are global ecosystems. So looking at, on one side, Android and iOS, these are the actual ecosystems that will play the predominant role going forward. The software in between those ecosystems is pretty much interchangeable because the basic requirements for the modules that they are built on are the same. And those two systems will dominate. The question is, how do you interface with that? And what kind of a business model you can build on it also. Because, I mean, for you, going forward, it may certainly make sense to sell the garment, but also the value-added application that is based on the garment. So you may even give the garment away for free and make your money based on a certain business model that is based on the app that is connected to the garment. I don't know. I mean, this is where I think things will go.
So what would the perfect startup team then look like? Who would be in the startup team?
In terms of talent?
In terms of talent, yeah, and skills.
Well, we're always looking for, you know, for the most part, you always have somebody from the technical side that's really good and had the idea like how to, I don't know, twist it into the garment and make sure that it works, that it even sustains washing at 95 degrees. I don't know. I mean, this is always happening. But what is missing are people to really take it to the market and explain it to people and really make sense of it. Because, you know, as always, technology is fascinating, but where are the use cases? We have seen so many great technologies, but we didn't really see relevant use cases, so the technologies died. So you always have to think end to end. Yeah. When I'm putting something into the garment, what is the final use for the consumer and where's the value add for the user, so the users would love to have it? That's the question.
If you think of physical spaces, which are the spaces right now, globally, that are driving this change? Of course, the Silicon Valley.
It's Silicon Valley, number one. Then there's a lot of nothing. Then it's Boston. Then it may be Tel Aviv, depending on what you're talking about. But in this case, it's a very interesting mix of talent for hardware and software. Berlin is growing really fast. From my perspective, Berlin will be the Silicon Valley of Europe in 4 to 5 years. There's so much room in the city. If you look into Weißensee, Friedrichshain, Pankow, you can set up 1,000 startups next week. There is enough space. There's really great talent in the city. There's a lot of creativity. The social structures in the city are not molded like in, I don't know, Munich or Hamburg or Düsseldorf. And so I'm encouraging young entrepreneurs to come here and start their business here.
And where do you see the chances for Berlin? In which specific field?
Well, you know, the easiest ideas to start are always based on software, because infrastructure cost is low. You can rent your servers. It's a very easy endeavor. But also when it comes to hardware, wearables, it becomes easier and easier, because now you have those makers labs, you have hardware accelerators, and starting your own company based on hardware systems has become so easy compared to 5 or 10 years ago. But I clearly see Berlin playing like more on the software side, now more and more on the hardware side as well. There's a lot of also medicine technology, pharmaceutical technology being put in place, but for the most part it's software and hardware solutions like, again, sensors, wearables, comparable items.
Okay, so to wrap this up, the fashion guys need to gather technology and knowledge about technology. Tech guys need to gather information about user experience and about the consumer and about the use cases.
Yeah.
And all of them, they have to mingle around and then come up with great ideas and startups.
Yeah. I mean, in the end, you have to find a compelling solution that is really attracting people. Just one last example. I'm sure most people here know Fitbit and those wearable devices. Yeah, and so recently there was an earthquake in California, close to Berkeley. And the first entity that found out about this was not the early warning system for earthquakes in San Francisco and the greater area. It was actually the Fitbit guys. Because of course these devices are all connected. And they could also precisely determine where the epicenter of the quake was, because those people woke up first.
And you couldn't have imagined this kind of a use case for such a device.
Nobody thought about it.
Yes, of course.
But suddenly they're in a position to tell the authorities, earthquake here.
Yeah. So we have to move fast, we have to come up with ideas and then figure out on the way what possibly use cases may be, right?
Right.
Okay, that's German culture. Thank you very much.